Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
We're joined now by Paul McCreary, a Democrat from Franklin, who's running to represent the 82nd Assembly District. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Hello, thank you very much.
So you worked previously as a EMT. Amid the coronavirus pandemic, do you think more should be done to protect Wisconsin's first responders, EMTs, firefighters, police officers?
Yeah, I think that is a huge deal in this area. I think that we need to make sure, first and foremost, that we need to protect ourselves, make sure that every Wisconsinite is very careful and takes their own precautions, because the fewer people who get sick, the better it is for the EMTs, for the firefighters, for the police. Now, on top of that, the state assembly needs to do their job and make sure that there are protections in place for EMTs and firefighters so that they do have this ability to take off time when they're sick, that they have the ability to take the needed precautions in place.
One of the things that Wisconsin is dealing with in the midst of all this is tax collections. Governor Evers has warned that they could fall dramatically. We could be looking at $2 billion less in tax collections. Do you think that Wisconsin should be cutting spending or raising taxes and fees to address that shortfall?
Yeah, it's very likely that we're going to run into a fiscal issue in the next couple of years because of the COVID crisis. And in the past decade, we've found that we have cut a lot of spending from education and healthcare to the point where it's so bare bones that we really can't afford to cut education and healthcare anymore. I would propose one thing that we can do, first and foremost, is expand Badger Care and accept federal funds, which will help plug some of the budget issues that we have as far as healthcare goes. And then I would also say that we need to look at additional revenue possibilities, perhaps look at changes in the sales tax, for instance.
Do you think that the legislature should be allowed to draw the next set of district boundaries, or do you support Governor Evers' People's Maps Commission to draw those lines?
Yes, I think this is a huge deal and actually a large reason why I'm running. I think that good governance needs to come first and foremost. I do not think it makes any sense that the legislators draw the district maps. We need to come up with a fair process that assures that politicians are not in the process as much. They don't have the hands in the actual drawing, that we have a nonpartisan way of drawing district lines. I think this is a big deal because it affects everything else. When politicians have safe seats, I feel like they are no longer able to be held accountable by the voters. And I think that accountability comes first. So that is a big deal for me.
Do you support legalizing medical and/or recreational marijuana in Wisconsin?
As far as medical and recreational marijuana in Wisconsin, I think that we've seen that Michigan has already legalized recreational marijuana. Illinois has already legalized recreational marijuana. We're kind of stuck in this middle area where it is illegal in this area, and we're stuck with enforcing these laws that are no longer on the books in our neighbors' areas. I see a great opportunity where we can legalize marijuana, which will really reduce a lot of costs as far as enforcement goes, because we've seen our neighbors already go through this. And it will also benefit us as far as additional revenue areas that we can collect taxes on those sales.
What do you think that the legislature should be doing to try to address racial inequalities and disparities in the state?
Yeah, I think that one area that we need to consider is, as we've seen in the past couple of months, that there's definitely an issue in this country with different types of violence, that we have seen excessive force in police and police brutality in this country. And I think that's something that needs to be more regulated as far as more state control. So something that's not on a piecemeal basis across the state, something that we have minimum standards that are put in place immediately.
When it comes to property taxes, Wisconsin is known for having some of the highest in the country, which is why what school districts and local governments can levy in property taxes is limited or capped. They can pass referendums to exceed those caps. But if you're elected, would you vote to keep those tax caps in place or eliminate them to give local governments and schools more control?
Yeah, I think we do need to be creative as far as how the state collects taxes. And as far as property taxes, that should be more geared towards the municipal level. So I think that the state should not be as heavily involved in the property taxes area, and we should eliminate that cap and allow the 82nd district, which includes Franklin, Greendale, Greenfield, to have their own rules in place and other areas to determine what is best for the people of those areas.
Another source of revenue that Milwaukee City and County has been pushing for is a half-cent local sales tax. Do you think that local governments should have more freedom to have alternative sources of revenues other than property taxes?
Yes, I think that a sales tax might be very beneficial in that it allows for areas to no longer depend purely on local property owners, but also help raise funds that might be coming from guests who come into this state. I do not think that it is fair that anybody who comes into the state from Illinois, from Michigan, from Minnesota, does not have to share that burden when they come into this state. So a sales tax is a great way to level the spending.
What about gas taxes? Wisconsin has struggled to find a stable way to pay for highways. Governor Evers had suggested raising the gas tax. Would you vote to increase the gas tax?
I think a gas tax is a lot smarter way to raise money for highways as opposed to registration costs. So we've recently seen a lot of registration costs go up in the state. And that is an annual cost that is very high for a lot of car owners in the state. So instead of raising those costs that they see on an annual basis, that is a huge amount of income that goes out the door at that one time. The small marginal cost of raising the gas tax would be very beneficial in that it would raise revenue, but also level load it among people who come into the state, for instance, if they're driving through the state, rather than purely on car owners in Wisconsin.
One other area that the pandemic has hit is healthcare providers. Do you think the legislature should make hospitals a higher priority in the next state budget?
Yeah, I think that looking at hospital funding is very important. Looking at how we work with the hospitals in the next budget is a huge deal. As mentioned, I formerly worked as an EMT. I've worked in healthcare my entire career. I think that we really need to look at how that's done. One of the my top priorities is assuring that Badger Care gets expanded. So we do have more funds coming in from the federal government to help the hospitals and make sure that there aren't as many people coming in who are uninsured. I will tell you, when I worked as an EMT, it was nonstop. So many people that I helped that were really struggling and really worried about having to take that expensive ride when they really didn't have insurance. So being able to make sure that all Wisconsinites are not afraid to call an EMT, to call an ambulance and go to the hospital is a big deal.
Do you think businesses that follow the practices and recommendations for preventing coronavirus should be immune from lawsuits?
Yeah, I think that is something that the legislature should take a look at. I think that if a business follows the state rules and is responsible, there should be some protections in place for them.
What about in terms of when local governments are authorizing public works projects? Do you think that they should give preference to Wisconsin companies in the bidding process?
100%. I think that the companies that have shown that they can create jobs in Wisconsin for Wisconsinites should get priority when we're looking at public contracts.
You've got a primary coming up soon. Less than a month now. What do you think makes you the most qualified candidate, and why should people support you instead of your opponent?
Yeah, so I've met my opponent several times, very nice gentleman. But I would say what differentiates me is that I've got the experience in place as a business owner, as a healthcare employee that's worked in medical devices, that's worked as an EMT, that has that experience over the years that can really help reinforce some of the needs that people of Wisconsin need in Wisconsin legislature.
Are there any other important campaign issues that you want to talk about that are either you think are important to your district or the state that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I would say that one thing that we really need to take care of is our local businesses. It's the backbone of our economy. We need to make sure that Wisconsin businesses, especially throughout the state, that have shown that they can employ local Wisconsinites, are taken care of. And there has been a lot of issues, a lot of problems with COVID lately. So the Wisconsin legislature needs to step up and make sure that the employees and the businesses are taken care of in this state.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And maybe we'll get to meet in person instead of just virtually sometime. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
I really look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.